This story is called My Mom Went on Vacation with Her New Family on My Birthday, leaving me home alone, so I kicked them out of the house because it's legally mine. Hey everyone! Before we dive into today's video, I need your support. We've noticed the channel isn't growing as fast as before, and subscribing is one of the best ways to help us out. It's quick, free, and keeps us creating great content for you. Your support means everything. Let's work together to grow this channel. Thanks a lot! Now let's get into the video. Hey Reddit, I've been thinking about whether or not to share this, so go easy on me. I'm an 18-year-old guy, and to be honest, my life has been a bit of a mess for as long as I can remember. This isn't a plea for help. It's about what happened when I finally decided to take control of my life and the house I grew up in. Let's just say things didn't go as smoothly as I hoped. Here's some background. My dad passed away when I was 10, which was obviously terrible. He wasn't just a great father, he was also my best friend. After he passed, he left the house we lived in to me and some savings in a trust fund, and my grandparents were in charge of everything since I was a kid at the time. The house was meant to be mine legally when I turned 18, but until then, my mom had full access to it because she was supposed to be taking care of me. However, that didn't exactly go as planned. My mom remarried when I was 12, and everything changed drastically. Her new husband, let's call him Steve, not his real name, came with 2 kids of his own. Suddenly, it felt like my mom had started a new life with this new family. And I was just there like an old piece of furniture they hadn't thrown out yet. At first, I tried to adjust. I was 12. What else could I do? Steve wasn't terrible to me, but he wasn't great either. He treated me like a guest in my own home. And his kids, well, they weren't awful, but they were loud, messy, and entitled. They'd take over the living room, leave their stuff everywhere, and mostly ignore me. By the time I got to high school, I had figured out how things worked. If I wanted anything done for me, I had to do it myself. My mom was too busy playing super mom to Steve's kids, and my room was the only space I had control over. Even that started to change slowly. Little by little, Steve's kids' stuff started appearing in my room. Old toys, random junk, even boxes of clothes. One time, I came home to find a broken scooter in the corner of my room. When I asked my mom about it, she just shrugged and said there was no room in the garage. At this point, I was spending more time with my grandparents than at home. They were the ones who actually cared. They made sure I had what I needed, helped with schoolwork, and just listened. My grandpa especially was always there for me. He's the type of guy who doesn't say much, but always knows what to do. Fast forward to a few weeks before my 18th birthday. My grandparents sat me down to talk about the house. My grandpa was super laid back about it, as usual. He said the house was going to be mine soon, and legally, I would have full control of it. He told me it would be up to me what to do with it. I nodded, but in my head I thought, sure, but nothing's really going to change. Little did I know how wrong I was. The night before my birthday, I was actually kind of excited. Turning 18 is a big deal. It's a life milestone. You can vote, you're technically an adult, and in my case, I would finally own the house. It felt like the start of something new. I was imagining a decent birthday, nothing fancy, maybe a family dinner, maybe a cake, maybe a few small gifts, just something to celebrate the day. But no, of course not. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone when my mom walked in. She was holding a travel bag and had that distracted, absent look she always gets when she's not paying attention. Oh, by the way, she said casually, as if reminding me to take out the trash. We're leaving tomorrow for a vacation, just me, Steve, and the kids. You don't mind staying here alone, right? I stared at her, thinking I must have misheard her. Wait, you're leaving tomorrow? That's my birthday. She barely looked up. Yeah, I know. But we've had this trip planned for months. You'll be fine. You're old enough to take care of yourself. Just order some pizza or something. Order some pizza or something. That was her big plan for my 18th birthday. No party, no dinner, no acknowledgement that the day even mattered. I felt a surge of anger, like I wanted to yell, "Are you serious right now?" But I didn't. What would be the point? So I just sat there staring at her as she walked away, completely unfazed. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of suitcases being rolled down the hallway. I got up, still half asleep, and walked into the kitchen. There they were, my mom, Steve, and the kids, dressed in their vacation clothes, looking like the perfect family. My mom glanced at me as she poured herself a cup of coffee. "Oh, good, you're up. Don't forget to lock the door when we leave." I leaned against the counter, watching as they laughed and joked, completely ignoring me. "So, you're really just leaving?" I asked, feeling like I was about to burst. Steve looked up from his phone and said, "Come on, man, you're 18. You don't need a babysitter. Besides, this trip's been on the calendar for weeks." I stood there, gripping the counter tightly. My mom didn't even glance at me when she said, "We'll be back in a week. There's food in the fridge." Then, they just left. I stood in the doorway and watched as they piled into the car, laughing and talking like they were going to Disneyland or something. Nobody even looked back. They just drove off, leaving me standing there in my pajamas, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. I closed the door and locked it, just like she asked. For a moment, I stood there in the empty house. The silence was deafening. I spent the morning in a daze, not sure whether to feel angry, sad, or numb. I opened the fridge to see what food my mom had left me, and it was pathetic. Half a carton of milk, some leftover takeout, and a box of frozen chicken nuggets. Cool, I thought. Happy freaking birthday to me. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my grandma. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. We'll be over soon. Love you." That message felt like a lifeline. I don't know what I would have done without my grandparents. They arrived about an hour later with a cake, a bunch of balloons, and a gift bag. The moment I opened the door, my grandma hugged me and said, "Happy birthday, my boy." My grandpa followed behind her with a proud smile and a wrapped gift. They didn't just save my birthday, they saved me. We spent the afternoon in the living room, eating cake and talking. They shared stories about my dad, how proud he'd be of me, and how much he loved me. It was the first time in a long while that I actually felt like I mattered. After we finished the cake, my grandpa handed me an envelope. "This is from the lawyer," he said. "It's official now. The house is yours." I opened it, and there it was, the document that made me the legal owner of the house. My grandpa smiled and said, "This is your home now. You're in charge." For a moment, I didn't know how to feel. On one hand, it felt amazing, like really amazing, to finally own something that was mine. On the other hand, it made me realize how messed up everything had gotten. This house was a gift from my dad, a place where I was meant to feel loved and safe. Yet it had turned into Steve's playground, and I was treated like an unwelcome guest. My grandma must have noticed the look on my face because she put her hand on my shoulder and said, "You deserve to be happy here. If anyone makes you feel otherwise, remember, you have the power to change that." Her words stuck with me, but I wasn't sure what to do with them at that moment. That night, after my grandparents left, I was lying in bed scrolling through Instagram when I saw a post from my mom. It was a picture of her, Steve, and the kids all smiling in matching outfits at some fancy resort. I don't know why, but I clicked on the comments. It was full of compliments like, "What a beautiful family," and "You're such an amazing mom," yet not a single word about me. I wasn't part of their family. I wasn't their son or their brother. I was just the guy who happened to live in their house. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to keep living like this. This house was mine, and it was time I started acting like it. The day after my birthday, I woke up feeling a strange mix of determination and dread. Part of me was ready to take back control of my life and the house, but the other part was terrified of what that would actually mean. It's not like I'd ever stood up to my mom before, not truly. Most of the time, I just kept quiet because it was easier than dealing with the fallout. But after what happened on my birthday, I couldn't do that anymore. I wasn't just some kid who had to put up with their nonsense. So I decided to take a good look at the situation. Let me tell you, this house was a mess. The living room was cluttered with their things, Steve's tools, the kids' toys, random junk they hadn't bothered to put away. The kitchen was disgusting. But the worst part was my room. I opened the door, and it felt like stepping into a storage unit. Boxes were everywhere. My desk, The one place I used to do my homework or just relax was buried under a pile of papers and old magazines. My bed was shoved into the corner, almost like it was an afterthought, while the rest of the room was overtaken by their junk. I stood there for a minute, just staring at the mess, and something inside me snapped. This wasn't a home anymore. It was a dumping ground, and I was done letting them treat it like one. I called my grandparents that afternoon to tell them what was going on. "You've been patient long enough," my grandpa said. "If you want them out, you have every legal right. We'll back you up." Hearing him say that gave me a boost of confidence. I had always known the house was legally mine, but hearing my grandpa, the one person who's always been the backbone of our family, say it out loud made it feel real. Still, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. My mom wasn't just going to pack up and leave because I asked. I needed a plan. My grandparents helped me go through all the paperwork from my dad's estate to make sure there wouldn't be any legal surprises. The lawyer confirmed what we already knew. The house was mine, and my mom had no claim to it. If I wanted to, I could issue an official eviction notice and make them leave. But even with all that on my side, the thought of confronting her made me nervous. "You're doing the right thing," my grandma said. "You deserve to live in a place where you feel respected and cared for. Don't let anyone take that away from you, not even your mother." Over the next few days, I started preparing for what I knew was going to be a battle. I cleaned up as much of the house as I could, partly to keep my mind occupied, and partly because I wanted to remind myself that this was my space. I packed up all the junk they had left in my room and stacked it in the hallway. I cleared off my desk, rearranged my bed, and put up a couple of photos of my dad that I had found in an old box. It felt good, like I was reclaiming a little piece of what had been taken from me. But as much as I tried to focus on the positives, I couldn't shake the anxiety. What if my mom refused to leave? What if Steve got involved and made things worse? I'd seen how they ganged up on me before, turning every argument into a twisted blame game where I was always the bad guy. Still, I knew I couldn't back down. The breaking point came a week later when they returned from their vacation. I was in the living room when the front door opened, and they all walked in, dragging their suitcases behind them. My mom glanced at me and said, "Hey," like she hadn't just abandoned me on my birthday. Steve was cracking some joke about how expensive the trip had been, and the kids were already arguing over who got to watch TV first. I just sat there, watching them act like nothing had happened. They didn't care about me, the house, or anything except themselves. That night, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I walked into the kitchen where my mom was scrolling through her phone. "We need to talk," I said. She barely looked up. "What's up?" I tried to sound firm. "I want you and your family to move out." Her head snapped up, and for a second she just stared at me like I had grown a second head. "What are you talking about?" she asked. "This is my house now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Legally, it belongs to me, and I'm done being treated like a guest in my own home. I want you to leave." She laughed like I had just told the funniest joke. "You can't do anything. You're just a kid. You can't kick us out. This is our home." "No," I said, my voice sharper now. "It's not. It's mine. Dad left it to me, and I have the paperwork to prove it." That's when Steve walked in. "What's going on?" he asked, looking between me and my mom. "He's trying to kick us out," my mom said. Steve crossed his arms and smirked. "Good luck with that, buddy. You're not going to make it on your own anyway." He pissed me off, but I tried to stay calm. "This isn't about you," I said. "It's about me finally taking back what's mine. You have 30 days to pack up and leave. After that, I'll have no problem getting the lawyer involved." My mom stood up, her face red with anger. "You're being ridiculous," she said. "We've lived here for years. Where are we supposed to go?" "That's not my problem," I said, my voice now cold. "You've had years to figure it out. Instead, you treated me like I didn't exist. Now I'm done." What followed was a shouting match I'll never forget. My mom called me ungrateful, selfish, every name in the book. Steve jumped in too, accusing me of being a spoiled brat who didn't, 1254, appreciate everything they'd done for me. Then she stormed upstairs, slamming doors and yelling. Loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Steve hung around pacing the living room like he was trying to intimidate me, muttering things like this kid has no idea what he's doing. But I didn't back down. I went to my room, shut the door, and sat on my bed shaking from all the adrenaline. I kept telling myself I did the right thing, but it was hard not to feel overwhelmed. This wasn't some minor argument. I just stood up to my own mom and told her to pack up. The next morning, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. My mom refused to make eye contact with me, and Steve kept giving me these smug looks as if he expected me to back down at any moment. The kids, who likely didn't understand what was happening, continued to run around the house as usual, leaving their toys and snacks scattered everywhere. By the time my grandparents arrived, I was on the verge of losing control. My grandpa walked in first, his expression calm but serious, followed by my grandma, who looked ready to take on anyone. My mom was in the kitchen, pretending to ignore them, but I noticed her glance up when my grandpa entered. "We're here to make sure this goes smoothly," my grandpa said, setting his briefcase on the counter. "Where's Steve?" Steve came out of the living room wearing his usual cocky grin. "Ah, so the cavalry's here. What's this about?" "This is about the eviction notice," my grandpa replied, pulling out a stack of papers. "Legally, this house belongs to my grandson, and you and your family have 30 days to leave. This document makes it official." Steve's grin disappeared quickly as he grabbed the paper and skimmed it, his face turning progressively redder with each word. "You can't be serious," he said, throwing the paper back on the counter. "This is ridiculous." "It's the law," my grandpa said firmly. That's when my mom finally spoke. "You really want to do this?" she asked, glaring at me. "You're going to throw your own mother out of her home? What kind of son are you?" The guilt hit me hard, but I refused to show it. "It's not your home," I said quietly. "It never was. It was Dad's, and now it's mine. You've treated me like a guest here for years, and I'm done. I deserve better." Her face twisted, as if she couldn't decide whether to cry or shout. She went with shouting. "You're a piece of trash," she said. "Everything I've done for you, and this is how you repay me? After all the sacrifices I've made?" "Sacrifices?" I shot back, losing my temper. "Like abandoning me on my birthday so you could play happy family with Steve? Or turning my room into a storage unit? Or acting like I don't even exist half the time? Yeah, thanks for all the sacrifices, Mom." The argument dragged on for what felt like forever. My mom tried every trick in the book, crying, yelling, cursing. Steve joined in, calling me ungrateful and telling me I'd regret this decision when I realized I couldn't handle living on my own. Even the kids got involved, whining about how mean I was being and how they didn't want to leave. But I stood my ground. "You have 30 days, I said, cutting them off. "After that, if you're not out, I'll have no choice but to get the authorities involved. I don't want it to come to that, but I will if I have to." My grandparents backed me up every step of the way. My grandma, usually sweet and quiet, even stepped in when my mom tried to use my dad against me. "Your father would be so disappointed in you," my mom said, tears streaming down her face. "This is not what he would have wanted." "Don't you dare," my grandma snapped. "Don't you dare use his memory to manipulate him. You've taken advantage of that boy in this house for long enough. It's time for you to move on." The rest of the day was a blur. My mom disappeared into her room, slamming the door behind her while Steve muttered curses under his breath and stomped around the house like a child throwing a tantrum. I spent most of the afternoon with my grandparents, going over the legal process to make sure everything was airtight. That night, my uncle came over with a locksmith to change the locks on the doors. My mom didn't even come out of her room to stop him, but Steve stood in the doorway, watching like he was looking for a fight. "You really think this is going to work?" he said, crossing his arms. "You're just a kid. You don't know what you're getting into." "Maybe not," I said, meeting his glare. "But I know one thing. I'm not going to let you treat me like crap in my own house anymore." Over the next few weeks, things only got worse. My mom and Steve refused to pack up their belongings, clearly hoping I'd back down. Instead, they made my life as miserable as possible. The kids left their toys everywhere, blasting the TV at full volume every chance they got. Steve kept eating the food I bought for myself, and my mom started leaving passive-aggressive notes around the house. "You'll regret this," one of the notes said. "Family is all you've got." I wanted to scream. I wanted to punch a wall. But instead, I called my grandparents and told them what was going on. "You're doing everything by the book," my grandpa reassured me. "They're just trying to wear you down. Don't let them." By the time the 30-day deadline arrived, my mom and her family had finally begun packing. But it was clear they weren't going without a fight. On the last day, my mom tried one final effort. "I hope you're happy," she said as she loaded the last box into their car. "You've torn this family apart." I didn't respond. I just stood there, watching them drive away, leaving the house and me behind. When the door finally shut, I felt a wave of relief wash over me, like I'd never felt before. At first, it didn't feel real. The house, for once, was completely silent. I stood there for a few minutes, letting it sink in. For the first time in years, the house was mine. My grandparents arrived soon after they left. My grandma pulled me into a hug the moment she walked in. "You did it," she said, her voice full of pride. My grandpa nodded behind her. "We're proud of you, kid," he said. "Standing up for yourself isn't easy, but you did the right thing." We spent the rest of the day cleaning the house from top to bottom, getting everything back into place. The first week after they left was peaceful, but it didn't last long. My mom wasn't the type to let things go quietly. She started calling and texting me constantly, alternating between curses and outright threats. "Don't think I won't take you to court over this," one message said. At first, I ignored her, but the texts kept coming, and the things she said began to get under my skin. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I knew the house was legally mine, and I had every right to reclaim it. But still, the way she spoke made me second-guess myself. I called my grandparents to tell them what was happening, and they immediately stepped in to help. My grandpa got in touch with the lawyer who handled my dad's estate, and we went over everything again to make sure we were on solid ground. "You're doing everything by the book," the lawyer reassured me. "She doesn't have a leg to stand on." That gave me some peace of mind, but the stress didn't go away. My mom wasn't just trying to get to me, she was also dragging the rest of the family into it. She started spreading rumors among my extended relatives, painting me as a heartless, ungrateful son who had thrown his own mother out on the street. At first, I didn't even know this was happening. I started getting random texts and calls from aunts and cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, all asking me what was going on. So I sat down with my grandparents and some of my closer relatives to explain everything. I explained everything to my relatives: the neglect, the clutter, and how she had abandoned me on my birthday. I even showed them the legal documents that proved the house was now mine. My uncle, who's always been blunt, didn't hold back. "She's been using you and this house for years," he said. "It's about time someone stood up to her." News spread quickly, and eventually opinions started to shift. Some relatives still sided with my mom, but the ones who truly mattered were on my side. My uncle even confronted her at a family gathering, calling her out for her treatment of me. "You abandoned him on his birthday," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "And now you're playing the victim? Give me a break." Soon after that, my mom showed up at the house unannounced. She pounded on the door like she was trying to break it down. When I opened it, she started ranting immediately. "Let me in," she screamed. "This is my home too. Where are we supposed to go?" I stood there trying to keep my composure. "It's not your home," I said firmly. "It's mine, legally. You've had years to sort out your situation, but instead, you treated this place like a free ride. Now it's time for you to move on." She tried to push past me, but my grandpa, who happened to be visiting that day, stepped in. Her tone shifted from anger to pure rage. Her face twisted, as if she was about to lose control. "Are you freaking serious right now?" she yelled, pointing at my grandpa. "This is your fault. You've always hated me, haven't you? You've been waiting for this moment to turn my own son against me, you old bastard." My grandpa, as calm as ever, didn't flinch. "This isn't about me," he said evenly. "This is about you and the choices you've made. You've taken advantage of him and this house for far too long. It's time to move on." But she wasn't finished. "Move on? Move on to what, huh? A cardboard box? You think you're so high and mighty with your little speeches, but you're nothing but a bitter old man sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. My grandpa raised an eyebrow but didn't engage. You've made your bed, he said. Now you have to lie in it. That only made her angrier. She turned to me next. You're just like him, she spat, her eyes wild. A selfish, ungrateful little brat. I hope this all blows up in your face, and when it does, don't come crying to me or your precious grandpa. She stormed down the driveway, shouting at my grandpa over her shoulder. You're a miserable old fool who ruined everything. I hope you're happy, you piece of crap. I stood there, my chest tight, watching her leave. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, hearing those words thrown at the one person who had always supported me. But as my grandpa placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder, I reminded myself that I wasn't in the wrong. In the following weeks, things finally began to calm down. My grandparents and I spent more time together, cleaning, redecorating, and turning the house into a real home for me. My uncles and aunts pitched in too, helping with repairs and offering advice on how to manage everything on my own. The house stopped being just a house. It became my sanctuary, a place where I could build my future and honor my dad's memory. Every time I walked through the door, I felt a deep sense of pride and gratitude. Honestly, I think I came out of all this with scars, just not the kind you can see. I always thought turning 18 meant freedom and starting fresh, but no one tells you how complicated and messy it can be. I didn't expect adulthood to be so tough, and I certainly didn't anticipate facing all this drama just to feel like I had a place to call my own. It wasn't easy, not at all. There were so many moments when I wanted to give up and let them win, just because it would have been less exhausting. But now that I'm on the other side of it all, I can say that taking back my home and my life was the best decision I've ever made. It feels different now when I walk through the front door. The house no longer feels like a battleground. It feels like mine. I've been thinking a lot about what's next. For one thing, I've been working on turning the house into a place I can truly enjoy, and honestly, I think I deserve to celebrate after everything that happened. I want to mark this as the start of something better. I've been considering throwing a proper birthday party, something like what I should have had in the first place. Nothing too wild, but something fun. Maybe I'll invite some friends, cook a nice meal, and have a night that's all about good vibes and no drama. What do you think? Should I go for it? Thanks for reading, by the way. This whole experience has been a lot, but getting it all out here has been strangely therapeutic. If you've got any thoughts or advice, drop them below. I'd love to hear what you think. And seriously, thank you for sticking with me through all of this. It means a lot.